This one's about philosophy, and I have a couple books. Philosophy of Aristotle, which is like one of the most crucial books that I own and have owned, and it's a very cheap, small book that's got majority of the works of Aristotle, and it's been really good. And this is a book I just picked up, Aristotle for Everybody by Mortimer Adler. This guy is a really good author. He was a professor, and he compiled this great book series, Philosopher too, and I recommend him on YouTube, and all his books. The best books I've ever read, other than like Moby Dick. I think he's like number 2 in my life of all his books and his lectures too. And he wrote this book called The Great Ideas, which is 102 ideas, and he goes through all the great books and talks about their viewpoints on all those topics like God, nature, love, philosophy, government, all these types of major topics. But when I first found this guy on YouTube, I watched, I don't remember how, I think I was looking into literature and like the best books to read, kind of like the best list, top book list. And it was a lot of modern, like just mainstream stuff that's not what I was looking for. I was looking for like the core of like the Western canon. And I stumbled upon this list of the great books of the Western world by Mortimer Adler. And he compiled this set from Homer to Freud of the greatest books of the Western culture, I guess. And he seemed very like classically educated. It kind of introduced me into classical education, and he's very well spoken, articulate, and I liked the way he talked, which kind of really intrigued me, which it kind of led me to a rabbit hole of literature in general and all his stuff. This is another book, Basic Works of Aristotle. But I liked his interest in philosophy and how practical he was and how like reasonable he was, very common sense stuff. So this book, Aristotle for Everybody, is very like common sense, and it just kind of breaks down Aristotle's main doctrines, or what he taught, into simple language that's like kind of introduces you to his works. But philosophy, I feel like it's a bad rep. It's kind of what you take in university or school that's just kind of a joke. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of substance to it. It's kind of like, they do the same for like logical steps of logic, like Socrates is a man, or they go through these basic like logic structures, syllogism, all this different examples that are kind of just boring, and it's not really what philosophy is and what it always was. And there's a lot of depth in philosophy that's actually very rich and worth your time. And the whole core of philosophy is not just to sit around and think like people, kind of the pop culture idea is just like the picture of Aristotle on a statue with his thinking, like contemplation. They just think it's just people that just kind of waste their time. They don't actually, philosophers are just people that think, or that's not really a real profession. But they're missing what philosophy is to begin with. So philosophy is philos, love, friendship, affection, and sophos, wisdom. So it's the love of wisdom. It's the pursuit of wisdom. It has to do with ends and a direction to an end. So every field has a philosophy to it. There's a philosophical structure to every single viewpoint that you take in any career field, any moral judgment, any scientific inquiry, any vision or ideal that you have is all a philosophical stance. Everyone has a philosophy of life. Everyone has a certain value system of what they think the right way to go is, and what the end goal is, and what's the best utopia. So the main philosophers, you go back to the big 3, which is Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And Aristotle, I think, is the best of the 3. I think he was the wisest, and Plato's good too, but Aristotle really kind of perfects what Plato was teaching and gets things right. And this lectures that he wrote that we use for, all the books of his works are so deep and so universal that thousands of years later you read them and it's like applicable to you, and it's such a structured logic that it's like kind of undefeatable arguments. Not everything, there might be one or two things that you could argue he was wrong on, but even in his lack of the technology that they had at the time, they were very wise, maybe wiser than us. And everything he has just sticks to the modern day, which means it's like true wisdom. It's universal, and it doesn't change with the times. It's just human nature. So politics, science, government, nature, logic, aesthetics, beauty, art, everything has a philosophy behind it. If you want to study mathematics, there's a philosophy of mathematics. If you want to study science, there's a philosophy of science. That's why, to get your PhD is a doctor of philosophy of whatever topic you just learned. It's deep academic knowledge and skills. And if you read any geniuses, polymaths, or people that were just brilliant minds, they had a very solid philosophy that was so foundational that's kind of why they were a genius. I mean, Da Vinci, Einstein, Steve Jobs. You take these people that were innovative, engineers or presidents, founding fathers, they have a philosophy that everything they do is based on this philosophy. It's their ideal system. It's what they're aiming towards. So that's what philosophy can do that science can't do, and all these other fields are just means, but philosophy is the end. It's the telos. It's the whole reason why you're doing something and what you're using it for. So you can use the means of science to discover something or create something. You can use the means of engineering to design something. But philosophy is, what is it being designed for? What are you using it for? And say, for example, medicine or shipbuilding or war or military, there's a certain means to the equipment you need or how to build it or the art of making it. But once you make it, it's like, what are you using it for? Everyone has a philosophy of what they're using something for. And there's different philosophers throughout time that we look to as these different schools of thought of philosophy, rationalism, existentialism. There's the ancient philosophers, there's forms and Plato and metaphysics, logic, ethics, like ethical theories and what's the right way to live for, happiness and morality. There's politics, which is political science or political philosophy about what's the best form of government, how should you run a society. So philosophy has application to everything. And I realize anybody that is wise, the way they speak is just, they've obviously read some philosophy, and they have a background of the different viewpoints, and they have their own philosophy, their own viewpoint, which they kind of enforce into every other part of their life. So Elon Musk or pick any person that they talk a certain way, they're thinking through the same thought process through everything they do. And and people that are very well versed in their philosophical stance, they can answer any question in a way that addresses it so well, even if they don't know nothing about that topic, because they have a certain underlining foundational value behind it. So, for example, Steve Jobs, if you listen to interviews of him, he would answer things in such a solid way that like he knows what he's talking about, even if he knew nothing about that topic, because he had an underlining philosophy about that topic, about the consumer or the user, or where we're going with education or the government or the environment, or he just knew his beliefs so well. And a lot of people, they don't even know their beliefs, and they're kind of all over the place. And that's why I think reading Aristotle kind of sets the foundation of your mind and your life. And it introduces you to topics that's like, I should have known this my whole life, but now it just kind of confirms and orders your mind in a way that's very beneficial to you. So if you read ethics or politics or even the metaphysics, it introduces you to these categories in your mind that just stick with you forever. I mean, you'll never forget them. So one is like labor, leisure, play, and rest. That's a categorization that just sticks in your mind to that you never really forget. The golden mean and moderation, that one you never forget. Or even about nature, capital N, is very beneficial to learn about man's place with nature and artificial versus natural, and these core topics. And also philosophy is central to like Western culture. It's where it all started. I mean, you go back to Athens and Greece, is where the Western culture basically originates in a way. I mean, you could also, and then it spreads to, you know, Europe and obviously America. They use all these Greco-Roman concepts, gods. You look at our currency system, you look at all our foundational stuff about the government, Athens and democracy and all that stuff. But Western culture is foundational to philosophy, and vice versa. Philosophy is foundational to Western culture. Everything in our literature, everything in our movies, in our culture, I mean, paintings, art, it's philosophy. I mean, Socrates was this figure that's used as, it all started with him, but it obviously existed before him and after him. I mean, before him, the pre-Socratics, I believe that they truly gave Socrates the wisdom that he had. Like, wisdom is only passed down from another person. So he didn't just come up with that out of thin air, but that he might have, you know, he might have reformed certain things, or he was kind of the master of it at the time, and Plato reformed or took Socrates that was passed down. Aristotle is Plato's student, and he takes Plato's philosophy and reforms it. That's why Aristotle is such a genius, because he uses these Platonic ideas that he was taught, and he just perfects them, and he answers the question that Plato was seeking to answer. So he takes what's good, and he takes what's unanswered, and he answers the unanswered stuff. Philosophy is really just inquiry and questions, and a philosopher is just basically the equivalent of a child that's just curious, and they're asking these deep questions that they don't even realize how deep they are, but they're fundamental, deep questions that's rooted in the ends of every single man's life. Where are they heading? What's the purpose of things? What's the origin? What's the ending? Why is it the case? What does it really mean? Where does it come from? Why are we here? What's the utopia of man? Like, what's the ideal of the state we're reaching towards? What's our aim? It's all about aims, and that's why any good company has a strong, good philosophy to it. And you can see the ones that really thrive are the ones that stick to those same roots. So Walt Disney or something, the root of it was meant for a children's imagination, and ways to appeal to kids and their minds. And Aristotle, probably the wisest man that ever lived. I mean, other than Jesus, I think he was so crucial to wisdom. Still is. And we all refer back to him. He's kind of the philosopher, the one that we all look to as, it was so solid that it kind of can't be refuted. It's kind of got a mathematical structure to it. I think I already said this, but every company or family or individual or society, or extrapolated to any form you want, they have a certain vision of the future and what they want and what they're chasing. Everyone is chasing towards a future something of themselves, of their company, of, you know, what they think is the best state of living. So if you read Plato and the Republic, it's his ideal state of a society, a city, a group of people, a philosopher king as the leader. I think anyone that doesn't read philosophy is just missing out on this deep, rich benefit to their life. And they don't love wisdom, they don't love the truth, they're not seeking answers, and they don't like structure and order in their life. They're very aimless. But if you have order and you're aiming towards the best, then you'll have at least the background of the greats, and it will enrich your life. Who wouldn't want to love wisdom and truth? People that are fools and they're gonna just waste their lives. They're not heading toward, they're just filling their mind with entertainment and things that are useless, temporal things that don't benefit their lives. Aristotle philosophy in general benefits your life. It brings depth, it broadens your mind to every topic that you see the underlying layer of all of it. So if there's some political thing that's happening, if you know the philosophy behind it, if you know the political kind of what's the philosophy driving this position, then you can break it down so easily and you can understand what their motives are. You see the principles and causes of things, and you see the ends of things before they even happen. So if someone's got a certain viewpoint and they start saying these trigger words that are, you can kind of recognize, oh, this is this type of philosophy, then you know exactly where they're headed, what their intentions are, and what do they truly want. I mean, either the right thing or the wrong thing. And there's some dangerous philosophies that are incorrect, wrong, morally wrong. It's the wrong way of viewing life. And there's some that are wise and the right way of viewing life. And every part of nature and life is interconnected with your philosophy. So your money, how your money's spent, how your time's spent, your relationships, what truly matters, your value system, what is virtue. And I mean, if you read Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, or you read John Locke, or you read the Founding Fathers, you'll see this common stance that you can categorize into, oh, there's all these people that have these same philosophical stances. So a lot of them group it into Aristotelian, Aristotle stances, or Plato, Platonism, or even like Descartes of, dualism of mind and body, or Karl Marx, or Hegel. Or it's not that the person is mimicking exactly what they believe. They might, because they've read them or they're a fan of them, but they don't even realize it. Their school of thought or their line of thinking aligns with a certain type of philosophy that you can categorize them all into. So you can take Thomas Aquinas and put him under Aristotle because it's this Aristotelian logic. It's the same core foundational positions that Aristotle had that they build upon, reform, use, and or Augustine or uses Plato, or so once you read these philosophers, or you read Bertrand Russell, History of Western Philosophy, and you get all the different viewpoints, you'll start to align with a certain school of thought that you agree either about the nature of man, the natural law either agree or disagree with that. Eternal things, God, ethics, and certain moral stances. So there's utilitarianism and education, how you should educate your child, and what's the end goal of education, government, obviously, finances, economy, what is important in art. There's even philosophies on aesthetics and beauty, and is it objective or subjective, and truth, objective truth, subjective things, moral relativism. So if you look in the world and someone has a certain conviction, it's about the environment, it's about the government, it's about war, it's about charity, it's about military, it's about any topic. Pick any topic. What's their philosophy? And do you agree with it? And if you don't know their philosophy, then you should step back and learn the fundamentals of it, because every single modern position you can trace back to an ancient philosophy that everyone can be categorized into this group of thought that thousands of years ago they were thinking this same topic. So you can take atheism or materialism, and you can trace it back all the way to Democritus, or I think Lucretius, or I might be mixing those up, but I think it was Democritus, about like the atomism, and so the Renaissance was a rebirth of all these Greek ideas, these philosophies, that they advanced all the sciences. And then you have modern day, which is just advancing those. So our roots are all in Athens, Greece, Greek thought. It also has to do with happiness, and to live a happy life. I mean, that's a crucial concept in Aristotle, is what is happiness, and what are these different hierarchies of goods about. We're kind of misordering these goods, that these pleasures are just temporal things that go, and we're not ordering the highest one of, virtue, contemplation, art. And the more you read, you also learn how we have changed the meanings of these words, that they don't even mean what they used to mean. Philosophy used to mean like just a seeker of truth. So there was the philosopher of science, philosopher of nature was basically a scientist, or a philosopher doesn't have the same context meaning as it does today. Today it's kind of like a joke, like it's just someone without a job, or a professor. But this Mortimer Adler guy, I couldn't recommend him enough. He's like one that I will pass on to my kids. I will tell everyone about the rest of my life. He really impacted my life, and still does. And I think he was very wise. He kind of reminds me of Socrates. If you look at the YouTube channel Common Scholar and go to the 6th grade ideas lectures and watch those, and just the way he talks is like basically like Socrates. He was very wise. He'd ask questions. He knew these foundational topics so well, of these deep questions, that he already knew the answers, because he was like an older man in those lectures. And he's a really good writer, and he's very common sense and very easy to understand. And it's just one of those things where you read and you'll never forget it. It just kind of changes the way you think. And it's, if you didn't have a classical education, it just informs you on these classical ideas and subjects that change how you view that major field. So when I think of art, I think of it differently now because of Adler's classical definition and writings on what art is and how it's a skill, and the liberal arts, what they used to be, and what a liberal education is, and even on God and truth. And I think he really was like logical, and he made philosophy actually useful. It already was, but he just he had really good teachers himself. and he was a great teacher himself. He mastered the art of teaching. There's even videos of him in lectures with like high school students, and just how he interacts with them, it kind of elevates them, to they ask certain questions, or he just corrects them in a way that's like a very good teacher. He's kind of like the ideal teacher to me. The most famous quote, the unexamined life is not worth living, from Socrates, or no, it might have been a different philosopher. I think it was Socrates. No, the unexamined life is not worth living. It just means a philosopher is someone that inquires, examines their life, asks questions, and keeps seeking the truth and wisdom. And they have a love for wisdom. And any great leader, they're usually very well read. Definitely the founding fathers are very well read, well educated, and they definitely read Aristotle, Plato, Cicero, all these, great people. They're very cultured. And it's really not hard to become cultured. It's not like you have to be some well-educated, spend thousands of dollars, get a PhD or a master. It's just you like to read, you're well-read, you have a good, well-rounded view of the world and history, and it's really just going back to reading the greats, which is the great books of the Western world by Mortimer Adler. Look it up. There's like 90-something volumes, and you start with these crucial texts that will introduce you. If you're going to start with Aristotle, I'd start with ethics. It's very simple to read, and it's just packed with stuff. Also metaphysics. And he wrote a lot of works, but they're all good. I mean, on generation and corruption, I think it's a good one. And the great writers, great thinkers, they all kind of based their ideas on these previous thinkers. They all build upon each other. So when you start with Aristotle, Plato, they started building upon these topics to reform them, or Euclid and mathematics, and you start with these foundational ones you build upon, and that's how you get true wisdom and knowledge, and you learn the principles of things. You go back to the origins, you go back to where does this all stem from, and that's how you're going to get a really good understanding of what it is, where it's coming from, what the future is going to be. You can predict the future of the past. And you'd be surprised when you read these old books. One, they're very applicable to modern day because it's human nature. So it's not like you're reading something that's just useless. It's just completely relevant to your life. Two, you start to see history and how they relate to these topics, these beliefs. And then three, you see the modern day, where this comes from, what this could result in. They predicted this, they already knew, kind of like if you read old sci-fi novels and it's like this dystopian prediction, you can kind of already see where things are heading in a good way or bad way. And you could see what not to do, which direction not to take. Everything that we build, create, has a certain use to it. So you build a ship, it has a use to direct to where it's going to be traveled to, what it's used for. So I think literature, the great books, are so important because they can be applied to everything in your life. Literally everything can be applied to these stories and this knowledge, and it sticks with you, and it's something you can't lose. It's in your mind forever, and it's such a gain. It's money will come and go, things will come and go, but your knowledge will stay, and you can grow on that, and you can use that to actually gain back your resources. Actually, the knowledge that you gain, say you lose all your money, if you're well educated, well rounded, you can use your knowledge, philosophy to find ways to make it back. Because if you want to understand how business works, how currency works, how resources work, you start at the foundational philosophy of all of them. And say psychology, how the mind works, philosophy as well. Freud, deeply based in philosophy and philosophical stances. I mean, that's the origin of all this stuff. I mean, Hippocratic Oath, philosophy, medicine philosophy, economics philosophy, finance philosophy, government, education, family. And the last topic I'll talk about is religion. So there's science, which is the means of things. We figure out discoveries or we invent things, engineer things. There's philosophy, which is the ends of things, where we're aiming towards the direction based upon reason. You can reason your way through a philosophical stance. Then there's religion, which is the top tier one, which has reason, but it's based on faith. It's kind of goes beyond the physical. So there's the physical material science. There's the scientific and non-material philosophy, which can be based on reason, which goes into these abstract concepts and topics and things that are non-physical but real, logic, mathematics. Then there's religion, which is a mix of the physical and non-physical, and it's based on faith, reason as well, but it's kind of a step above reason, where you have to have faith. There's a limit to reason and logic. It kind of goes beyond into this mysterious realm that transcends all these other two: material, non-material, spiritual. But the philosophy connects the two. There's the reason, which is material, which is connected to the philosophy, and then there's the immaterial, spiritual, which is connected to the philosophy as well, through these forms and abstract things and epistemology, ontology, the mind, the soul, God, non-material things. So it's a bridge to both sides, and that's why there's these Christian philosophers, Thomas Aquinas, Augustine, that they try to connect the two. They take Aristotle and they take the scriptures and they kind of combine them into this Christian philosophical stances. But there's some philosophies that are just opposing to the religious beliefs and doctrines. There's some that unite them together. I think they can be united because it's just a belief system. Any belief system can be united to a philosophy, good or bad. I mean, even Hitler had a philosophy about, eugenics and the perfect race. Stalin did. People that had very bad, Karl Marx, communism, that's a philosophy that infiltrates through the form of government of communism, socialism. So there's the philosophy of democracy, founding fathers, the West. Even go back to, Greece. There's the philosophy of dictatorship, socialism, communism, Stalin, Soviet Union, Karl Marx, and so some would argue that, there's right and wrong ones because there's these moral aspects to them. Democracy as the philosophy of equality and freedom, communism not. So if you read the Constitution, it's a political document that's got this philosophical stance of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, which is, they're taking this stance that we have these unalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that there's this equality, and we're all created equal under one God. But in conclusion, it has to do with the self and society, culture, and man. It's your viewpoint upon what man is and where he's going. It deals with the ought, the duty, and ends, telos. And it's something that replenishes you, nourishes you. It kind of never stops giving. It's there's no end to it. Kind of like there's not really an end to mathematics too. We just keep discovering more and more and more. there's not an end to philosophy. There's not too like a stop of this is all the wisdom we can get. It just kind of, it keeps coming. And I think this period of AI, it raises these philosophical questions about human nature that are very deep, and it's kind of more in our face about what is a human? Is there a soul? Is our mind really just a biological like computer? Because what's the difference in the machine mind and these humanoid robots? As they get closer and closer to a human, what's the point where they are human, or will they ever become human? Is there a barrier they'll never become human? But if they have tissue that mimics the skin, and they have a mind that mimics a computer, and or our mind mimics the computer, which is just a brain, and then our eyes, which are like cameras, and our ears, which are like mics that have, they sense the audio, or the touch, which is just sensory information. It's just raising this question more and more of what's the difference in a person and the machine, because the machine is getting closer and closer to the person, and they're actually designing these robots as much as they can based off human anatomy. They want to get a hand, they look at the tendons and the muscles and the bones to create a robot hand because it's mimicking the human hand, and they're getting them closer and closer. They've even have robots that have sense of touch because they have these hands that processes sensory information to their neural network, which is the computer. But they don't have emotions. But what are emotions except for a response to a certain stimulus that causes a certain reaction? They can do facial reactions. They can do, but do they feel? Do they have a soul? No, but we also say they don't have consciousness. But what is consciousness? To know you're self-aware. How do you know when they're self-aware? When they say it? Because that could be a program. So, and then they say, how can you prove you're self-aware? I think, therefore I am, from Descartes. But they could say, I think, therefore I am. But maybe they're programmed to say that. It's a bunch of questions. And what is our place? And how do we get meaning? And all these questions about life. And really, these AI systems, they're mimicking reason in the brain. And it raises the question of our brain and how capable we are. And is it just really a computer? Because it's mimicking everything we're doing. It's taking all the data that it got from the internet, just human knowledge, and it's just formulating answers based off the data that we have. That's what the human brain does too. But it also generates and creates, or it appears to generate and create, as we generate and create based off our previous experiences and data we have in our heads. Anyways, your philosophy matters. Read Aristotle. Read Mortimer Adler, watch the videos on YouTube of Mortimer Adler, mainly the lectures of the 6th grade ideas by, I think it's Common Scholar is the channel, and it will really benefit your life. And I think that's all I got. Peace.